Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sonic Frontiers playthrough. One of those Cocos has a big old glob of soap on their head instead of hair, and I don't know why. At least that's what it looks like.
It's a fashion statement of Chaos Island.
Okay, so the character that we're releasing on Chaos Island is going to be Tails. This is the point at which Sonic starts feeling the most like Sonic that he's felt this entire game because he starts getting really relaxed around Tails. He's also maybe putting on a bit of a show so that Tails won't worry.
Yeah, I think at this point he's trying to overcompensate because he is clearly in pain. Sonic's idle animation at this point is his I have a headache stature. And again, to say again, I think maybe the fourth time in this commentary, I think they should have done more with that visually speaking. I think at this point Sonic should have like bits and pieces of like the red corruption around his body.
Yeah, didn't they do something like that in the comics at one point? What was it?
IDW, the metal virus,
Yeah.
had bits and pieces of it over his body. And I really liked that about the metal virus until it ended.
Well, you know he's going to get better eventually, so.
No, it's even then, even knowing that at some point or other, I understand that things have to go back to the status quo. That arc ended very fucking anticlimactically, and it sucked.
Really? Did it?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I wonder how come.
Yeah, it ended very, very anticlimactically. I don't want to give it away if you haven't read it yet.
Well, I'm open to spoilers. I don't.
But
care.
our audience may not be.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, I just like...
that never stops us.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. It's just that when we're talking about the ending of a particular arc, if you've been just particularly interested in it, if you haven't read it yourself yet, then I kind of don't want to be the one to
Yeah, I get that.
give it away. At the same time, don't get too excited.
The thing is, it's going to be like probably another 15 years until I can afford to read those goddamn comics. So, yeah.
Oh, well, you can get the trades. The trades are not expensive at all.
I'd love to. I'll let you know when I can. In about 10 years.
Oh, Christ alive. All right.
When I buy this stuff, I can't stand to buy it and read it one volume at a time. I have to buy it all at once.
Do you have like I'm pretty sure you can get. I mean, if you have like some sort of like reading device, like a Kindle.
I do, but like I'd still need to buy them all at once. Otherwise, I wouldn't feel like I'm getting them all. I had that same problem when I was reading the Death Note manga. So
I've been spoiled by the. It's not quite the same, but like the Shonen Jump app.
But like I'm also saving for another series entirely because I'm really interested in reading the Twilight Princess manga. What I've read of that is really good, and it's 10 volumes and going. You know.
Who publishes that?
I think it's the same people who did the other Zeldas, but this one's like less of a rinky-dink video game manga tie-in and more of a full featured series.
Yeah, it's a full featured series. Yeah, exactly. Kingdom Hearts did the same thing actually, where it's an adaptation of the game's plots, but they do way more fucking interesting things with it.
Maybe they did that eventually, but the ones I bought didn't.
Which ones specifically, if you can remember?
I bought like the early ones, when they were like on sale in my local bookstore when I was a kid. I still have them laying around. I just didn't like them. I don't like them in the same way that I don't really care for the Ocarina of Time manga. You know, it's just like, okay, this would be great if I cared about rinky-dink comic book tie-ins, but I don't.
Well, I know you specifically are no stranger to reading adaptations of other bits of media, because like the books. When we're doing Resident Evil, you were the one to mention the books left and right.
Well, yeah, but like that's just an interesting piece of Resident Evil history because it was so early on in Resident Evil, and elements of it wound up being adapted into the games. So. But, like, even that starts to get a bit cheap after a certain point.
Will you, this goes for both of you, but will you, like, actively go for, like, other forms of media involving a property if you really like it that much?
From my point, it depends on how much effort is put into that adaptation. Like, even even for me, I'm a big Mass Effect fan, you know? And Mass Effect has a lot of
Right.
comic tie-ins that are actual, like, separate arcs. And it also has the novels and stuff. Now, I like the novels, but they're also written by the lead writer of the first 2 games. So they're actually, like, they actually feel like an extension of the game's story and all that. Then there's the Dark Horse comics, which fluctuate between being pretty interesting, but maybe a little too short to really breathe, and not very good at all. So, yeah.
I think Sonic might be the only franchise where I will actively follow everything involving it in some form or fashion. Like, I will play the games, I will watch the movies, I will read the comic books, I will watch the television shows. And I can't think of any other franchise outside of, no, not even Star Wars, because Star Wars, I'll generally just watch the movies and maybe a TV series here and there, but that depends on if I have any interest in it at all.
Well, yeah. Oh, I would add to that I really recommend certain novels, but, you know, you kind of have to look up a best Star Wars novels to separate the wheat from the chaff there. But Sonic, the comic, is an interesting thing because, like, the Sonic comic started out as a rinky-dink comic book tie-in, like unabashedly.
You're talking about the UK comic.
I'm talking about the early Archie comics. I have.
Oh, the early Archie comic. No, because there is something also called Sonic the comic.
Oh yeah,
too.
I know about that, but Sonic the comic is
Yeah.
different in a weird way. But like the Archie comics started out as a really low effort tie-in, you know,
Yeah.
you take one look at any given page in the first like 10 volumes of the thing, and it's terrible.
If you take a look at those earliest issues of the Archie comics, and you would think it's an adaptation of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and not Sonic Saturday.
The best part about that is that there were like different issues written at different times. So the early issues of the comic go back and forth between portraying Robotropolis as the Robotropolis from Saddam. And then in the next issue, it'll go back to being the rinky-dink cartoon robot factory, you know? So I'm using rinky-dink a lot, but you know what I mean, right? That really,
Yeah.
like, it looks like it was drawn by a 5-year-old and designed by a 3-year-old.
To be fair, it might as well be.
Yeah,
Yes.
but, like, it'll go back to being that factory the issue after they show the big old egg-shaped fortress from Saddam, and then it'll go back to being the egg-shaped fortress, because the issues weren't written by the same people at the same time and with like not nearly enough coordination between people, and like then it gradually leans more toward those like more interesting, mature-looking settings and locations, and then before anyone could really figure out what had happened, the Sonic comic had become every bit as big a comic series as like Superman or Batman, and holy, like I have no.
Oh, see, for video game adaptations, easily it's the biggest one, I would think.
Oh yeah, it was also like one of Archie's biggest properties forever.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes me wonder how they could let themselves lose that, but oh well. Actually, it's weird. There was, like, around the time the Sonic comics, like, rights started slipping and controversies with Ken Pender were happening, it felt like Archie was deliberately trying to edge people toward actual Archie. Like, they didn't want to care about Sonic.
Gotta save face while we're here.
Well, I mean, it felt like they didn't want Sonic to be their biggest property. They wanted Archie to be their biggest property. I don't know why they cared so much about Archie, but...
I guess it's the namesake.
Maybe, but like at the same time, like what was the appeal to Archie in the first place?
It appeals to old people who like to pick it up at the grocery store rack on the way out.
I couldn't tell you. I was never interested in Archie.
I've only ever seen Archie in grocery stores. I've never seen Archie out in like an actual comic store outside of like the modern reboot stuff, where I guess they're trying to push it in the comics market. I don't know. But
I don't know. I do like the TV show where it's just off the walls insane.
I normally don't try to judge shit by their cover. It's just Archie's inherent character designs and world design just bored me, like at face value.
It's extremely 1950s. This feels very safe and sterile.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I feel like I'm getting ready to be offered like a milkshake for 5 cents looking at an Archie cover.
The only time I've like actually found Archie's old school art style like interesting was when an Archie like artist did an issue of like a Batman animated series Harley Quinn thing in comics, and that was just because it was really surreal to see Harley looking like Betty.
Now, my favorite's the opposite. Was whenever Archie had an insane crossover and had characters drawn in his style, like the Punisher.
I guess they had more practice at that kind of thing than I thought.
Let's see, it was the Punisher. I think it was the Ninja Turtles at one point.
You know, it's not even that I actively dislike the Archie series. It's more that like I have no feelings toward it whatsoever. So I just cannot process why the company making it would try to emphasize it so hard over this other extremely long-running and successful comic series that they should probably make efforts to keep. But, you know, I guess we'll never find out what happened to that group of characters now, because the universe ended. And that's simulation theory in a nutshell. We're living in this world, but you never know when the lights will just turn off and everything will be gone because someone lost the rights to us.
I remember playing this stage like the first time, and 5-6 different times after I complete a ramp or a swing, I'm waiting for like the score to say awesome or sweet on the left side. That never shows up.
And that's kind of like it's cool seeing all this Sonic Adventure level design stuff here, but a lot of the point of the level design elements in those stages vanishes when you take away Sonic Adventure 2's particular ranking and scoring system, or its like grinding balance system or whatever else, because like that was a big part of the way the Sonic stages in that game were designed to play. You were supposed to be doing all these trick jumps and stuff.
But on the other hand, it's nice to be able to go down those long ramps with the grind rails actually working.
That too, yeah. Never let it be said that there was that Sonic Adventure 2 didn't have its share of jank. Getting things in those levels to work consistently was sometimes a skill unto itself. Like, you'd have to know, like, this rail will let you grind on it if you just touch it, but this rail you have to physically jump onto it accurately.
You have to actively land on top of it.
It's like...
God, I just want a decent rank.
A D rank, okay.
Fine.
Once you figured it all out, it's not actually that hard. Oh, this is a case where, yeah, you can enter the 2D sections from like the wrong place and just navigate them in 3D.
Yeah. I think once you take that ramp, though, you are locked into 3D. 2D, I mean.
Well, you're locked into the ramp anyway. I'm not sure if you'll go into 2D, but you might.
Yeah. Because normally I believe that like speed boosters and shit on the floor are the triggers to lock you in a different plane.
Yeah, maybe. It's a little inconsistent. There are some places where it doesn't seem to happen. Like, I figure with each of these sections, the developers went through and thought, okay, how many possible ways are the players going to approach this particular obstacle course? And they just put triggers wherever they thought it would happen, but then they didn't manage to guess them all. So players
the actual answer to that is when they didn't ask to. You know, because that is by far the most common complaint of this island, is that there are so many forced 2D sections.
It's so easy on this island, and to a lesser extent Island 5, to run into just a boost pad that launches you into another 2 boost pads that launched you into a locked
God,
2D
I just
section.
want to escape.
Yeah, and then at some point when it keeps happening, I just sigh to myself and I'm like, all right, I'll do your stupid obstacle course. And then at the end of it, I'm like, wait, where was I? Oh, darn it, I've lost my place. Where was I going? And that's kind of the major design weakness of the obstacle courses, right? Is that they take control of the camera away from you. They lock you into this little obstacle course that takes you halfway across the little mini island that you're on, and then you've gone in the opposite direction of where you wanted to go, and sure, you got a memory token out of it probably, but that's only if you didn't get locked into that obstacle course 5 minutes ago, which you did. 9 times out of 10.
this power to rescue you.
He's even enduring the side effects
You know,
than I calculated he would.
I have half a mind to think that maybe part of the reason they didn't go so heavily on the visual corruption on Sonic was because maybe they thought it was too similar to the Metal Virus.
Nah, I don't think that stopped him.
But like the way the cutscenes are playing, it looked like they maybe intended to at one point have it be more visible, and then they didn't for some reason. And part of that makes me think that maybe that decision was tied in to the decision not to do the memory loss plotline.
To me personally, the way I look at it is it'd be a good gameplay and story integration where, as the player, this is also assuming you have a strong connection to Sonic the Hedgehog as a character, you see him progressively getting worse. And it piques your curiosity to the point where you want to make sure that he succeeds in whatever he's trying to do. Outside of just, the general gameplay sense where you need to do something, you just do it naturally.
The other inherent problem with that gameplay and story segregation, though, is that it would inject more urgency into the main task.
Yeah.
Which is something that's always been a problem in open zone, open world style games, where you feel like you've got all these side attractions, but you feel like you shouldn't be doing them because the main task is so urgent.
Yeah.
Like there are mods to Skyrim that make that game leave you the fuck alone for a little while, So you don't have to immediately jump into the next main task because it feels like what your character would do.
Do you think there exists a collection of players that play this game and realize the further they are going into it, the worse it's ended up for Sonic, that they would just stop?
I don't think so. But I think a lot of players would focus on trying to help Sonic and would leave a lot of the game's content for after the final boss.
Yeah.
Which...
Like, have you ever had an emotional connection to a protagonist or a video game character to that extreme where... Well, I guess that's kind of the entire point of Undertale now that I think about it.
Yeah. And, it doesn't even have to be an extreme emotional connection. Some people, like me, just like getting into the feeling of being the character in that world.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult to ignore things that have been brought to the player's attention, or to put them off and say, I'll deal with it later, if it's not a task that it makes sense for you to make that decision in character. Like, for example... I mentioned Skyrim. Skyrim's got the whole world-ending dragon destiny plot going on. But, like, a lot of the time, you walk into town, and there'll be these two NPCs that are just, like, talking to each other about something that's going on. And it's like... You walk into frickin' Markarth, and someone murders someone in front of a street stall. And it's like, you're there for a reason, but you can't ignore the murder mystery, right? That would be dumb. It's like, in character, it's not just going to wait for you. I mean, mechanically, in game, it's absolutely going to wait for you. But in character, you want to give it your full attention because, like, it would be weird if your character said, you know what? I think I'll investigate that murder mystery next Wednesday.
Put that in my planner.
So trying to integrate side content into open world games has always been a real design issue. And Sonic Frontiers absolutely does not handle this with any kind of grace. But it would be worse, I think, if there was a constant visual reminder on screen that Sonic was dying, and you should probably do something about that sometime before the meteor falls.
Speaking of which, it's looking pretty close, so you might want to hurry up.
Chocobo breeding.
Oh, man.
I mean, at least in this game, it actually will wait for you because, like, in some really old games, they played that principle pretty straight. Daggerfall is pretty infamous for, like, if you ignore the main quest after you've been given your next objective for too long, the guards will show up and deem you a traitor to the Empire, and you have permanently failed the main quest. You can keep playing. You can keep playing, but the thread of prophecy has been severed.
Oh my god. Imagine playing Final Fantasy 7 and Meteor actually fell in 7 days. Like after they tell you the deadline for it. That'd be some shit. I believe that too.
It's actually surprisingly easy to fail the main quest in Daggerfall 2, not just because you can ignore it for too long, but because you can get sent to prison for too long, and that counts. So don't be a criminal dirtbag if you want to do the main quest. Wait until after the main quest. It's safe then. And as much as I'm griping about it, I wish games would re-explore those concepts a little bit more in the modern day.
I'm sure there are. It's just that they don't get nearly as much attention because
well, yeah. I mean,
they're not mainstream.
I mean, someone involved in Daggerfall's creation is making a spiritual successor sort of deal. That's sort of an indie thing that they're doing. What is it called? Wayward Realms or something like that. And I'm interested in that, but cautiously interested.
I'm kind of just like at a point where I don't even know where the fuck to begin, like looking for shit that might pique my curiosity because of just how large the indie scene is.
I just wait for people to tell me about stuff.
That is kind of at where I'm at too. Yeah, there was one game that's making the rounds right now. They kind of just exploded this week. I think it's like Hi-Fi Rush or something like that. Or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah, I've been seeing tweets about that. It just sort of came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
it's like,
but that's usually what happens. Like
I've seen tweets describing this, and don't add this to my count because it wasn't my words. Devil May Cry meets Sunset Overdrive.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
And that sounds interesting to me. But like, where did this game come from? And that's kind of the unfortunate issue you have to face if you're interested in indie games, is that they don't have so many marketing people shoving interesting stuff in your face all the time. So you actually have to go looking for the interesting stuff yourself, and like, who has time to do that? I don't.
Though the very thought of it is at the very least sounds exhausting.
Yeah, but as content creators, I mean, we're lucky enough to get occasional people saying, hey, are you going to cover such and such game? I really liked it or something. And it's like, I don't know what this is. I'll check it out.
Yeah, and like the easiest indie stuff to find has always been like the spiritual successor stuff. Freedom Planet, Shroud of the Avatar, that sort of stuff where... or ukulele stuff that's trying to recreate the magic of some bygone era. Anyway, it's Island 3, so the fishing prizes are actually really easy to get now. Look at how many fishing tokens I have. At this point, my chief fear is buying too many cocos and going over what I need, because they absolutely let you do that. I think at this point I can max out attack and defense.
If you don't after this, I'd be surprised.
Loud, clanging noises.
Sonic, I think you got a problem, buddy.
I don't have a problem. You have a problem, Big.
I can stop anytime I want. So he's furiously scratching his chin.
It's just really hard to mental math your way through figuring out how much of each collectible you need to max out the character, because the number of red and blue seeds you need, I think, changes as you go higher, and the number of cocos you need is 12 per level up, which is not at all an easy number to incorporate into mental math. You can sort of ballpark it by saying, okay, 2 12s is almost 25. That means I'll get almost this many with 100. But they sell it in 20s, and I don't know why. Because, like, there's no direct conversion rate between 20 and 12, as far as I know. So it's like they don't want you to be able to buy the exact number you need. They want you to ballpark it.
Why do Coco level ups come in packages of 12, but Coco packages from Big come in packages
It's just
of 20?
something very fucking odd about seeing, like, the classic Sonic Spring immediately followed up by, like, the 4K fish.
And that's why Sonic 06 sucks. At least the fish didn't kiss a hedgehog, though. I like how Eggman sort of goes through this whole rationalization process to sort of justify to himself his personal feelings. There's actually, like, a really good one-shot fan fiction I read very shortly after this game's release that is just Eggman talking to different versions of himself in cyberspace, like he's having a conversation with his shadow. And there are like 3 different versions of Eggman, all trying to dissuade him from seeing Sage as his daughter, but he eventually loops around to it anyway. I forget what it was called. I read it so long ago. I like this jab at Baldy McNosehair. This might be the only Baldy McNosehair reference that has been funny in several games now.
I wonder if this was changed in the Japanese translation.
Might be, but I think that after introducing Gerald Robotnik, that aspect of US canon was sort of integrated into the Japanese story.
Yeah, but the idea that his name was Robotnik and changed the name because of Sonic making fun of him is strictly a Western thing.
Well, it happening in Sonic Adventure is strictly a Western thing, but that doesn't mean they can't retroactively say it happened at some point in the past. So it's not as messy a bit of continuity welding as you would think.
I'm just curious as to what the workaround would be. If any.
I like this. I like this statement. Knuckles is here too. What a rube. But it's a little awkward that the last few egg memos in the game are just Eggman musing in a disconnected way about the different Sonic characters. Like,
yeah, I feel like these would have been like in the beginning of the egg memos, and you leave the stage stuff towards the end.
Well, I think I think this is supposed to establish that all of these earlier thoughts were thoughts that he had before the game began.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I do appreciate, Eggman actually talking about other characters instead of just Sonic. Like, sure, he always has that begrudging respect for Sonic, but it was always interesting in SA2 when Eggman's counterpart was Tails and not really Sonic. So how does he feel about, Tails being the genius inventor for the hero side? Well, now we know. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that his thought on that is basically, Tails could be a really serious threat if he stopped hovering in Sonic's shadow. I wonder if that's going to be a plot point at some point, because at the end of this game, he's going off on his own again, We might have a Tails Adventure 3.
Just runs Eggman out of business. Just invents a corporation.
I wouldn't mind another Tails Adventure Metroidvania type of game. I think
I would love that.
I mean, that would be wild if they did like a 2D side scroller Metroidvania starring Tails. Maybe his enemies could be the Babylon Rogues. Who knows? But like, okay. Oh, I'm 62 tokens short.
What do you mean you're not ready? I'm just talking to my best friend.
Sonic, did you buy 62 powers of seeds of power again? No.
Okay, so this is like a really Super Mario 64 kind of puzzle, or maybe a Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time kind of puzzle. It's interesting, and I wish they'd done maybe 1 or 2 more sort of platforming exploration switch finding puzzles of this sort.
Absolutely not. We need 2 more Tetris puzzles.
At the same time, it is a bit weird doing this as Sonic.
I remember this particular puzzle giving me a little trouble towards the end of it, because what you're doing essentially is that you're setting up platforms so that you can slide loop the final torch. But if your speed settings are set to max, as mine were, you're hugging the analog stick pretty tight.
Ooh. Okay. Well,
all right, that's all for.
I do like the idea of this puzzle. I just wish this was one that maybe got fleshed out a little more. Although, on the subject of little puzzles like this and fleshing things out, that is actually a weakness in the open world formula that Breath of the Wild in particular suffered from, is that you can't actually assume that anyone is doing any puzzles in any particular order, so it is extremely hard to build puzzles off of the concepts of other puzzles in an organic way.
In an organic way, I think, is the thing to stress.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild kept the difficulty of all of its puzzles relatively easy for like almost the entirety of its game, like maybe with the exception of the DLC ones. But like there were definitely shrines that shared the same puzzle concept, but they were also shrines that all had to bear the burden of potentially introducing a gameplay concept to the player.
To a point, there are specifically the combat challenges. There are some that were definitely built upon the ones previously. They're even labeled as such. Like,
Oh yeah,
I don't
major, minor, etc.
yeah, that kind of thing. And it's like, but the problem is that you can run into major before running into the minor sort of challenge.
But that wasn't as big of a risk because, you know, what is the player doing outside the shrines? They're fighting.
Yeah.
So, you know, the further into the game you get, you can adapt. But, like, for something that requires, like, a wind puzzle, for pushing, like, a ball around into a particular location to get an elevator working, they can't really do that. They can't really do that past a certain level of complexity. And I have a feeling that the same sort of design challenge factored in here because holy shit, the puzzles are easy. And like some of them ramp up in difficulty after a certain number of repetitions, but they are only able to do that because the game is divided into a linear set of islands. So the really hard Tetris block islands puzzles are on Island 5, after Island 3 introduces them and gives you a few easy ones, and Island 5 can reasonably assume that you've played one of those. But they can't really do that too often or too thoroughly because there's always the chance that the players aren't going to be doing many map puzzles at all. You know, it's that kind of game. Do what you want, but...
Kind of a Mega Man mentality. That's kind of the thing that I immediately compare things to, that gives you the choice, but they can't make one stage inherently more difficult than the other because this could be your first stage.
Yeah, but they're still able to develop concepts in an organic linear fashion within a given stage, at the very least. So instead of like one long linear challenge, it's 9 separate linear challenges. And then an end series of challenges in Wily Castle that tests the skills you gained along the way.
Yeah,
it's easier to organize that kind of thing in the kind of simple, straightforward formula that Mega Man has, though. With something like this or Breath of the Wild, the question is, which challenge will the player find first? You know?